help us understand our responsibility as role models. As I look at this audience, I see a lot of grandfathers and grandmothers, or potentially we're at that age level where we have that responsibility.
Right.
My question is that at our age, the obligation is to mentor those younger than ourselves.
Right.
Yet I find in our culture, our society, in the United States of America, and complete absence of a willingness to take on those younger than ourselves,
Right.
and bring them up to our level of experience,
Right.
and awareness.
Right. Well, as you mentioned, mentorship is, of course, the most important thing that individuals can offer. One of the things to recognize is that generations change, people change, and this generation of individuals is far more perceptive than perhaps previous generations were because of different training mechanisms. By perceptive, I mean that they might not necessarily rely simply on your words. They might not rely simply on what you have to say, but they'll be keenly looking at what is it that you're doing. Right? Meaning they are keen observers. They look at what a person does, the conduct part. Because many a times we get very good at saying certain things. You see? And when we come to an age, and I don't wish to sound arrogant here, but it's a common phenomenon, again, coming from my tradition, which could be literally translated as ageism. See, ageism. See. By age, meaning when you develop in age, certainly you gain more experience. See. You gain more experience, but the moment you cease to learn, that experience is not very helpful for the future generation. Meaning, in order to be an avid mentor, you also must exhibit similar passion to learn. You look at the best mentors, they are learning from their mentees. You see? At the same time, the mentees are looking up to them and learning. So how can you be good role models? By becoming one. Not by simply saying about good things, but by reflecting that in your conduct. Because people are far more perceptive than you think, and especially those little kids that do not interact with you on a philosophical level, perhaps not ask you what is wrong, what is right, because they simply observe your conduct. They simply look at you and say, oh, this is what my grandfather does or my grandmother does, and I love them, and if they do this, it must be right. You see? And they inculcate that view all the way to college. 17 years of habits. You see? When they come to college, and if they are posed with some kind of challenge, it's a big disillusionment. 17 years of their life, they believed in something by looking up to somebody, and it's all being shattered. You see? So, become the role model, I think. And it doesn't mean that every individual has to become, very sacrificial, sacrifice everything, but simply do the things the best you do in an ethical manner. Just like that farmer planting mango trees by the side of the road. Not too much thought, not too intellectual, just the conduct.
Do you foresee any way to integrate technology like internet and iPods and iPhones and all of this stuff that these kids have strapped to themselves? They're like watching TV with their iPhone, iPod, working on the computer. Do you see any way to utilize that technology
certainly.
in the ethics?
Certainly. I think, that's again a challenge that is posed to us is, how do we create new avenues for learning? So, whereas, we blame internet for a lot of things, but internet is also a wonderful tool to get the information across. So I think, yes, it's up to us to work up, to meet that challenge. And at the same time, look at the deeper reasons. Meaning, when you look at the model, for example, what the young kids are spending most of their time doing in front of the computer. What are they doing? Facebook, chats. What is it? community. See? So why is it that a kid prefers a virtual community on the internet rather than a real community of people around themselves? You see? So you again have to reflect on deeper reasons behind it. It doesn't have to do with lack of time, you see? But it has to do again with some fear of interaction. And where does that fear come from? You see? So those are the real challenges that we need to address. It's not technology that is bad, but how we utilize it and how it influences individuals. It's hard to say. I mean, did we evolve in a good way from 2,000 years ago? I am not entirely sure about that. You see, yes, life is more comfortable, you see, but when I look at the level of stress among the group of individuals, when I look at the level of fear of various sorts, I mean, today we have more phobias than we ever had in human history. When I look at that, I don't know whether we have evolved much or not. But it is true that technology continues to change our behavior. It continues to change our behavioral patterns. The amount of time we spend at our cell phones. You take a simple example. You see, 30 years ago, you wrote a letter, and you patiently waited for 2 to 3 months or 6 months before you got a response. You see? Today, you send out an email. If you don't hear back in 30 minutes, your world begins to collapse. What is that person thinking? Why hasn't he or she responded to my email? Did I write something wrong? Then you go back and reread your email. You see, what is that happening? That is simply deepening your behavioral patterns. You see? So the more time we spend with these gadgets, it is going to affect the behavior as individuals and of organizations and communities.
You mentioned the laws and the regulations that more of them are not the answer. Public hanging and that type of display is not the answer. Yet how do you hold people accountable? And in the case of Vail, if I heard you correctly, I thought you may have suggested he's a product of our society. What do you do with the guy like him?
Well, I did not say to eliminate laws. Laws are important in any social world order. What I suggested that laws are not solely responsible for making a person ethical. And by simply fearing law, we are not bound to become good citizens or virtuous human beings. But law is important in the sense that that is the conventional reality that we live in. That allows us to function in a certain manner. I came from India, and if I continue to drive on the right side of the road, it would create a problem if I didn't fit into the conventions of this country. You see? So you do have to adhere to certain kinds of laws and understand those laws as to why they are in place, rather than simply fear them.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Anybody else? You talked about greed, you talked about Madoff a bit. Did you notice that you had to go through a gate in order to get here tonight?
Yeah.
Do you see any conflict in, this place or potentially me as your audience? Because Vail is arguably a giant signal of asset hoarding. So, or is that not something you've thought about? It seems that, okay, well, to what degree am I as guilty as Madoff in some capacity? And I probably am.
Well, I certainly did think about it. That's why I'm here. See, there's no point of me giving this talk, in my own community, for example. See, there are problems there, but there are different kinds of problems. You see. But as I said, that you cannot blame others of fear of engagements or fear of interactions, unless and until you yourself are willing to cross that boundary. I don't believe that, if I believe that human beings cannot be transformed, then I'm in a flawed business altogether. So the very reason I'm speaking, the very reason that you're here, I believe, is that there is certain kind of belief that things can change. There can be transformation, as long as we are willing to make the effort. Whether it has to do with the kind of environment that we live in, it is up to us collectively how we change that environment, because we are the ones that created it.